an information architecture design methodology around SharePoint. This is what we have developed. And you can see this is a conceptual model. This is really saying that these are not necessarily sequential tasks. And you can see that it's broken up into the first row of strategy and vision, the second of research and discovery, the third row of design and development, then testing and validation and maintenance and enhancement. And then the columns, there's not necessarily a representation between each column, but the last column on the right are example deliverables, which really summarizes the activity in a work stream. And of course, you can combine those into a single document, but with this document, this kind of documentation really gives you a blueprint for a SharePoint environment. And you can see there's a lot of tasks, there's a lot of activities. They don't all need to be addressed, but many of them, and some of them can be addressed as in parts of other tasks. They're not necessarily sequential, as they say. For example, governance and socialization is something that you would do at all levels. And some deliverables are required as inputs for other processes. For example, use cases and user scenarios are used for testing. But you can kind of get a sense of there's a lot of stuff that you really need to do, to pay attention to when you do SharePoint. It's not a matter of just putting it out there, seeing what happens. Most organizations don't go through a formal information architecture process. And this is a process that's been developed over a period of years. It's borrowed from different fields. But you can kind of get the sense of this in terms of the first row. Where are we today and where are we going, right? What's our current state and what do we want to do? And what's that high-level understanding of the vision for our SharePoint deployment? That's very important. A lot of organizations don't have a clear vision of what they're going to be doing with SharePoint. Is it collaboration? Is it process management? Is it a source of truth around documentation? Is it for records management? Is it all of the above? You can do many, many different things, but putting it out there and being haphazard with that strategy and not having a clear vision is going to be problematic for you. But again, you can kind of get a sense of the types of things: gap analysis, heuristic evaluation, that's just a best practice evaluation. How far away are you from an ideal state? And then that becomes your roadmap. And the next piece of this is really looking at content and audience and tasks, and that's developing those requirements. And you could, in fact, go at this in different perspectives. So you could start out looking at content, you could start out looking at tasks, you could start out looking at audiences, or you could start out with site maps that and wireframes that you work on with your users. Again, there are different entry points into this. But the important thing is to recognize when you need to go into greater depth with each of these areas. Then we get into the actual development and design and development. And this is where a lot of companies jump in. They go right in and say, okay, what are our content types? And let's start creating site columns, and let's start putting things into the term store. And by the way, we should do a site map so we know where stuff is. And we'll throw some workflow in here. That's not the best way to go. Then the second to last one, taxonomy and user interface and tagging and auto-categorization, those are all testing, because you can test different areas of your design in different ways, because there are different types of processes. You definitely have to tagging, manual tagging. You definitely have to test auto-categorization. If you're using an auto-categorization tool, you definitely have to test the taxonomy. You definitely have to test the user interface. You may, in fact, make those part of the same test, but a good user interface or a bad user interface can wreck a good taxonomy. So it's important to recognize when you need to separate them. And then the last row down here of chevrons and the document icon, governance strategy and guidelines, socialization, communication, migration strategy. Migration strategy better be thought of at the beginning. And in fact, when you start looking at things like ownership of content and content audit, that's when you're starting to decide, well, how are we going to migrate this stuff? So really, a lot of this stuff starts in the beginning. Same with metrics. How do we know we're going to be successful? And you really do need to keep that in mind at the start